to a special edition of the Darden Admissions podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, we're excited to share another recording from our ongoing Faculty Spotlight series, a series we call Office Hours. This conversation features Luca Cian. Luca is a member of the marketing faculty here at the Darden School of Business. And in this wide-ranging conversation, we talk with Luca about his background, his passion and interest in both marketing as well as psychology, his current research, what led him to Darden, and so much more. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. So without further ado, here is our Office Hours conversation with Professor Luca Cian. Luca, I'm so excited to have you here. Thank you for joining for this session.
Thank you for hosting this session. And I know that you're doing a lot of things for Darden. So, I'm very grateful for everything you do. So thank you for hosting me this time.
Well, it's great to have you here. Where I always like to begin these conversations is really to learn just a little bit more about you and your story. So tell us a little bit more about you.
Love it. Well, a lot of complexity around that question. Well, I will say, let's start with maybe from a professional point of view. Although my accent is very subtle, I would say, ironically speaking, I'm from Italy originally. I grew up in this little town called Cortina d'Ampezzo. It's a little town in the Italian Alps, very close to the border with Austria. I grew up there. There are 6,000 people living there, but the mountains are beautiful. I'm a first generation college student. And so basically I grew up in this little town. And then I wanted to go to college, although no one actually knew exactly what college. I mean, we know what college was, but I don't know why exactly I wanted to go to college. Maybe because in Italian we call it like university. So I always thought, oh my God, when I will go there, I will learn like the universe or something like that. And so I went to college there in Italy in a city called Trieste, where I studied marketing and communication. And then at that time, back in the day, was basically a 5 years program where you had to do your bachelor and master together. And I really loved, especially advertising. So it was cool. I thought I was going into advertising. I was lucky enough that there was a international competition in advertising for all people in schools. And I won that competition 1 year, and I went to the Cannes, the Cannes Film Festival. Immediately after, there is like one of the biggest, if not the biggest, advertising competition called the Cannes Lions of Advertising. And so I went there. It was a fantastic experience. And so there I thought, you know what? I will stay in advertising. It was a really madman kind of experience, like champagne, creativity, love it. But then I realized that it was not really all like that. And towards the end of my master, I took this class in social psychology, and I really felt in love with it. I said, oh my God, what is this thing? Why it's so cool? And so I start... I was very active in classes because I was very involved. And one day, after the exam, my professor talked with me and said, "Hey, I think you really like this subject. You clearly have some very good comments about it. Do you want to work with me to some extent?" And I said, "Oh, I would love that." And so I started working with her, and she really changed my life. Her name is Sarah Chervai. Was my very first advisor, and so we started working together. And then she pushed me to teach. So I actually started teaching social psychology right off my master. And then I understood that I really needed to have a PhD to teach it. And so I was doing some works in the middle of it, but and then so I started a PhD, and during my PhD was in psychology. And during my work in the PhD, my dissertation was clearly between psychology and marketing. And there, my committee, being all psychologists, told me, okay, Luca, we give you the possibility to explore whatever you want to do, but we have no idea about this marketing thing that you're putting inside. So you need to find an external advisor. And so at that time, I was citing a lot of professors from Michigan, whose name is Richard Bagozzi. And so I wrote him an email saying, hello, my name is Luca. I cite a lot of your research. Would you like to help me, or at least have a conversation? And he told me, I like your research. Why you don't come here to the University of Michigan for a few weeks? And then those few weeks became actually 2 years, and he became the external advisor of my dissertation. Now, at that point, I did my dissertation as Italian style, so basically a book. And when I arrived here, after 2 years, I was visiting scholar at the University of Michigan. I really, working with this professor, I really understood two things. One, I wanted to be marketing. And two, the people at the University of Michigan with a PhD in marketing knew more about marketing than me, clearly. And so I sort of wanted to do a second PhD in marketing. And there I talked with another person who changed my life, whose name is Aradhana Krishna. And all these three people was really impactful for me, Sarah, Richard, and Aradhana. And she said, okay, I will take you as a sort of a postdoc for 3 years. At the same time, I took classes at the University of Michigan with the PhD students there in marketing. And so I became one of them and one of the cohort. And so I was publishing. I was actually trying to publish, and thank God I was able to publish in order to be more, in the US standard. The main idea of after a PhD is to get some publications so you can show what kind of research you're doing. While in the European model, it's not true everywhere, but at least the school where I was and that's true mostly for many of the schools in psychology in Europe, is you have to write a big dissertation book that is not an article, it's just like basically a book. But there's two different standards. And so in order to be attractive to the US job market, I had to publish some research in the top journals. So being in Michigan for another 3 years in this sort of postdoc, second PhD, really helped me because I was able to publish and then take some classes with the PhD there. And so the experience of this postdoc was very transformational because after that, I was able to enter in the job market. And I was lucky enough that I had many job offers. And the one that I liked the most was Darden. So I came at Darden and was loved since then. It's been 7 years at Darden. And 1 year ago, I got tenure. And so that's it. Very long answer, but yeah.
Well, when you ask, who are you? That's a great answer. Luca, so I want to go back a little bit in your story. So you originally started PhD in psychology.
Mm-hmm.
What was interesting to you about psychology? What really sparked for you in that social psychology class?
That's a good question. I was really fascinated to see maybe another way to answer this question is, how can't you be fascinated by the human mind, right? So what I really loved it was to see the social implications. So in social psychology, at least, there are many types of psychology, of course, but the thing that I really love about social psychology is that was a sort of applied psychology in many sense, in the sense that you learn principles that you can see have huge impact on everyday life, right? How groups dynamics are formed, how people behave in organizations, how concept like persuasion, concept like minorities and majorities, etc., etc. Like, so there are really things that you can see every day in practice, and you study there. And the cool thing about social psychology is that they tend to use a very strict methodology. So we ran experiments, and we have an hypothesis, we run experiments, and the results are compared using statistics. So I always love philosophy, but somehow in philosophy, one of the things that, is a little bit difficult to, for me at least, was difficult to reconcile is that maybe you feel a philosopher when it's really close to you, how you feel it. But many times there are people who say the opposite things, and it's really difficult to say who's right, who's wrong. Now, not in social psychology, we know who's right, who's wrong, because whatever we know now in the future may be completely different. But using experiments, statistics, and a repetition of experiments help us at least to have some proof of the hypothesis, maybe not the definitive one. Maybe one day we'll have better theories that will contradict what we know right now. But, having some empirical proof or evidence to support your hypothesis, I think is very cool.
So you mentioned that shift from psychology to marketing, and that probably connects back to your initial interest in advertising, I'm guessing. But what led you to say, marketing is where I'd like to spend my time and energy?
So I would say what I really like the most is the intersection between psychology and marketing. There is a big intersection between two, and that's where I'm really passionate about. It's something that I love. Because I could still use psychology that I love conceptually speaking. And at the same time, I really like marketing as well. I'm somehow passionate about objects, goods, and also the implication of that, if you do that, maybe people will buy less or more something. So you can really see things like that. And I would say a big change in my life was exactly during the dissertation that I was my PhD dissertation. So because of my background in advertising, I also had friends in advertising. And I think my very first year of the PhD program, now the PhD program in Italy is 3 years. Usually in the US is 5-6 years, but in Italy is 3 years, and you have to have a master, so it's shorter. But in the first 3 years, first year when I had to decide my dissertation, I had a friend of mine from advertising. He owned at the time advertising agency, and he told me, "Hey, Luca, we would like you to hire for a consultancy here, and we have a problem with one of our clients in the sense that he's selling sailboats, and there are two kind of sailboats, one that is very good value for money and one that is less good value for money. However, the second one sells much more than the first one, and there is no logical explanation for that. And so can you help with that?" And so that really sort of triggered my interest of psychology and marketing, right? Sometimes people take decisions about product without that are not completely rational. And how to explore that is this beautiful marriage between psychology and marketing, right? So understanding more about how the human mind works, and at the same time see real implication in the market. Say, hey, this guy has a sailboat company, and I would like to help him in his business, right? So I love the idea to merge the two things together, and that really triggered in me the idea to try to put the two things together. And fortunately enough, especially in the US, when I arrived, it was accepted. I think for sure I was the first person in the marketing area at Darden with a PhD in psychology. So it was was not that common, at least at Darden, but for sure was starting to be common to have this merging of the two things, so it was not completely out of reality, but for sure here, at least at Darden, I was the first one, and I'm glad they took the risk.
Well, you mentioned you've been at Darden for 7 years. You've been a faculty marshal. You've been recognized for all kinds of awards and teaching excellence. What led you to Darden in the first place? How did you say this is where you wanted to be?
Oh, wow. I have to measure my words here. No, a few things. First of all, the group of people. I was really impressed by the friendliness and the unity in the group. In the sense that I met the marketing group during the job interview, and I felt that they were really smart, but also nice. And I wanted to be an environment where I could get along with people, and not in a culture where, there is this sentence in Latin called mors tua vita mea, that means if you die, I survive. And that the culture that is common in many other schools, where basically, you hire a lot of assistant professors, and then only one will get up to tenure, and they're in competitions. But, you have always to look your back because everyone is hoping you to fail. While at Darden, despite being top school and very, very competitive, the environment was to support you, and they would hire all the assistant professors were hired with the idea that they could get tenure, if they, not that it's automatic, of course, the tenure process, but it's not necessarily an exclusion like, oh, we pit you one against each other, it's like, it was a different situation. So I really like the environment, the culture. I really love the possibility to teach MBAs and the case method, because I taught undergrads in Michigan. It was a great experience. I loved it. But then I was thinking, project myself like 20 years along the line, and sometimes when you teach undergrads, it's not true all the cases, but many times you go in class, you have this set of slides, and you update the slides maybe year after year. But I was thinking, this is going to be boring in 10, 20 years. Instead, with the case method, you go in class, and every time, even if it could be the same case, the discussion is different. The group dynamic is different. There are different people. You're getting to know more the people in the classroom. And I thought this was going to be fun, more challenging by far, but more fun. And also dealing with people that are a little bit older with more work experience was something enriching for me, in the sense that I also did consulting work, etc. But there's so much I learned also from my students, and was great to be an environment where I could do that. And the third thing, that relates maybe with the first point, I felt that I could be myself, with all my quirks and weirdness, instead of I would be accepted. While I had the impression in some other schools, although they were very, very good schools, top schools, maybe they were a little bit more stiff in some of them, not all of them, just some of them in their culture, or trying to put me in some specific boxes. So I'm really, without saying anything bad about other schools, there were other schools that were absolutely stunning and amazing. I was actually sad to say no to them, to be honest, because great people over there. I was just blown away by Darden and most of everything. So I'm glad that I came here, and I grew up a lot, for sure, in these 7 years. And I'm sure, other schools were absolutely great. I would have grown there as well. Nothing bad to say about them, but I'm very glad that I had this journey with Darden.
One of the things I enjoy about hearing faculty answer that question is that it runs very much in parallel with how our students ultimately end up thinking through the process. What brings them here? Community, the ability to feel supported, who they are, included in the community here, and then of course the learning experience, the case method. Darden is a case method school. It is all about discussion and interaction. Luca, I've enjoyed in office hours conversations asking faculty how they prepare for class, because I think that's interesting for students to hear the other side, right? It's not like you just walk in and wing it, right? So what does your preparation for a case discussion look like?
It really depends from the class. I would say the first year that were the most formative, I taught the marketing core. And when you teach a core class, you get together with, so imagine at Darden, we have 5 sections, section A, B, C, D, E. And in marketing, at least, each one of us teach one section. So for example, the first years I was in section A, and then the last year I taught the core, I was in section D. And we all come together, we all know the case, and we try to understand, okay, how can we teach this case in the way that we want to try to convey what we want to convey in the best possible learning, creating the best possible learning experience. And also we try to somehow forecast what kind of possible direction the students are going to take. And the leader of the teaching group, Tom Steinberg, was really fundamental for me in terms of the way I learned to teach at Darden, because he taught me a lot, like how to think about how to react to certain questions or to certain statements from some students, how to think about the case, right? So sometimes cases are really fun and interesting, but they don't bring any discussion. Instead, sometimes the case, when you read it, you say, boring. But in reality, the discussion could be super rich. And so how there is it's sort of a magic thing, in the sense there are a lot of things going on that you have to prepare. The first one is what you want to teach. What are the main things that you want to learn? And when I arrived at Darden, I wanted to say, oh my God, tomorrow I go to class, I want to teach like, boom, a million things. And what Tom told me at the beginning, and then took a few years for me to learn that he was right, is that at the end of the day, you cannot go in a class and even we go with slides, sometimes you show a million concepts, right? But they're not going to stick in the mind of the students or people for long. In 2 weeks, people mostly forget what's happening. Same thing with the cases. If you try to teach too much, they're not gonna stick. The main learning point is not going to stick in the mind of the students. And so the main idea is, okay, what is the very main point I try to convey? Only one or maybe two top that are trying to convey in this class, and what is the best way to convey this point in order that the people think about this thing. And so the knowledge and the lesson in this class is gonna be present in their mind for much longer. It's going to be more sticky in their memory, right? And so this is one, like what we call postures. That is a weird term, but basically how to create moments where, okay, we did a lot of calculations, a lot of consideration. Now, so what? What are we going to do with these things? And so that's something that you really have to plan. What is that you want to teach in this case. Second thing is how to create an arch between different cases. So every case wants to teach something, but you want them to be joined together. They want to be unified, creating an arch of learning. So one case should a little bit build on the previous one, right? And the third thing that I prepare is trying to understand, okay, where are the students? Where is possible this discussion can get lost or can get really into rabbit holes, or what are the objections that I may expect my students to make about this case? And ideally, you want You don't want to arrive in class and say, okay, tell me what is your case resolution. Wrong, 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 wrong. Let me show what is right, right? So the idea is to have questions so that you guide students through a discussion. And the goal is not necessarily that at the end of the case, everyone agrees on their resolution, but the goal is that everyone agrees that what we discussed together was one possible good resolution. There may be others, but that was one good resolution. So thinking about what are the right questions to let the class go in a specific direction. That takes some time and experience. And thinking about, for each question, how much are we going to discuss there? 5 minutes or 45 minutes? At the beginning, first year, I have no idea, right? But then with the experience, you start thinking, okay, I think we can spend here 5 to 10 minutes, maybe in another point, we need to spend 20 minutes, etc., etc.
This is a little bit more of an existential question, but did you know that you wanted to be a teacher, somebody who was teaching in a classroom? Was that
absolutely not? Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you.
No. Obviously, you've received teaching awards and you're distinguished in the work that you do. So how do you go from, I have no idea that I wanted to do this, to being really recognized as someone who excels in this discipline? So what sparked for you about teaching?
Yeah, it's a good question. I always lost. I always no idea what I was doing, honestly. I didn't have, my parents were supportive, but they have no idea what was a PhD or, again, I'm first generation college student. So, and I didn't have necessarily friends who went through my path that could teach me what was going on. So I went to college, and the way I reached the PhD was almost by incident, because I met this person, Sarah, and she really pushed me to, she believed in me, and she said, you could be good in research. So I said, okay, let's try it. Worst case scenario, we'll do something else. And then I was curious to do well. Actually, let me put it, I was anxious to do well in what I was doing. Once I do something, I want to do it well, right? So that's why from Verona, where I started my PhD, then I went to University of Michigan, because this mix of psychology and marketing, as I mentioned before, was not something that was done in Verona. And then when I was in Michigan, then I spent 5 years in Michigan, and said, well, now I really feel that my preparation is good. And after, by that time I was like 35. So well, you know what, or 34 or 33, I don't remember. But at this point in my life, I want to, probably the next step is to be a teacher. And then, but I was always taking, I also loved always consultancy. So I was always thinking, maybe I will go into consultancy or industry. But maybe the way, for me, what is important is that I've been a student for many years. And so I remember, especially in college, when I was going in class and there were professors that were coming in class and super boring, like, blah, 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 blah. And for me, it was like, well, if he or she or they are not passionate about what they're teaching, why should I? Right? So my main goal as a teacher is, no matter what I think about a specific case, I will come to class and I will give 110%. And I want to show that I'm enthusiastic about that case. No matter what, if I'm not, I could teach some cases where I'm not enthusiastic about, but it's very difficult that people can see through that, in the sense that my mission is, I want to convey passion and enthusiasm about marketing, because that's my main mission. You go to class to learn, but you want to learn from people who are passionate and enthusiastic. I'm not saying that this is true for everyone, but that's a truth for me. Like, I tend to learn from people who show enthusiasm about something. So my mission, I say, if I want to be a teacher, well, no matter what, I'm going to that class and show a lot of enthusiasm about that. And second, I was also able to connect as a student with faculty that believed in me, or they were like friendly, accessible, and humans, and vulnerable. And so I tried to do the same in class, being with all my quirks, sometimes making fun of myself, but being vulnerable, being a human, and trying to connect with the students. And if I see that someone struggles or someone excels, going there and recognizing that they're doing well, or if they're not doing well, trying to understand what's the problem, and trying to listen. I'm very curious about the dynamics, what is going well, what is not going well, And so I think that's why I'm so lucky that I love teaching, and fortunately, I have good results when I'm teaching. I think because of these two things, a lot of enthusiasm, passion. I could be sick. I went to class many times sick, like not feeling well, but no matter what, take 20 coffees and I will show enthusiasm, and also trying to connect with students. We are all people, and sometimes people are in different stages of their life, and it's good to make sure that, I cannot be I'm not a therapist. I cannot be a personal trainer, school trainer for everyone. But if I see that I can connect with someone, I can help in any way, I'm happy to do it. And so I feel like I have some empathy in class. When I see, for example, people are super bored, I change subject. Like I try to go with what I sort of an instinct of what's going on in class. I hope I do, at least. Trying to understand, okay, this topic is a little bit boring. Let's switch to something, And I was lucky that I learned a lot from people that are excelling doing this. Like one is Tom Steinberg that I already mentioned. Another one was a colleague of mine that is not at Darden anymore. She is in Europe, Laline Anik. She was an inspiration for me. She was incredibly able to connect with students and shows so much love, and I learned a lot from her. So I was lucky that I had also great examples that I tried to emulate in my life.
I appreciate your sharing that. I always just find it interesting to hear people's origin stories, where they're coming from, how they ended up here, and I think it's really powerful, Luca, for everybody to hear. Like, I didn't have a vision, I didn't have a plan for this particular thing. I just, I got interested in this. Somebody recommended that, and I discovered, hey, I like this. I enjoy this. So you teach a second-year elective on consumer behavior. I want to talk a little bit more about this course, but before I get to that question, I do just want to mention to the folks who are here listening to this conversation, if you have questions, please feel free to ask via the Q&A. I've got some questions. We'll keep rolling through them, but also want to know if you also have questions for Luca. But Luca, tell us a little bit more about consumer behavior. What's this class all about?
Yeah, it's a class that this year I'm not teaching, specifically because I'm teaching executive MBA right now. But I taught for 6 years, and was my baby. Like I created that elective, and I loved that to death. It was a big experiment on my end, because it was the first time was taught, at least in that format, at Darden. And it's a class that can go both ways. For example, sometimes if I look at schools like Harvard, for example, sometimes it's taught there with success, but then sometimes doesn't go well at all, and so they don't teach it anymore. At TAC, for example, as far as I know, there is not that class. So it's a class that could go well, or could be, especially in the master program. In the undergrads program, usually it goes fine, but for the MBAs, it's not a standard class. And what I try to do is basically, for me, was to understand first of all, what I can do that is not provided in a Darden at the moment. So I don't want to do something just because I want to do it. I try to understand what are the things that I think are missing in the learning environment. If I am a marketer, I should also be a damn marketer when I think about my class, right? So what is the target here? The target is my students. What do I think I can add value to their education while they are at Darden? And so basically I created this elective that was split in 2 modules. One is was marketing research. And students here at Darden, they do some sort of marketing research, but it's very quantitative. And instead, I wanted to teach them all the other techniques that are very often used in marketing, but they may need to use in their internship or their future, but they need to be not educated, but get familiar with, and like more qualitative techniques, experimental techniques. And what I always told to my students is that what I'm trying to provide is a tool set. So I'm not saying, from now on you're an expert on experimental design or on focus group, because then you need a full course or maybe more than one about it. What I want to do is that as a future manager, you need to understand that there are different problems that you face, and every problem requires a different marketing technique. Like I think about marketing research techniques as tools. It's not that you can use the hammer for every problem you have in your house. Sometimes you have to use a screwdriver. Sometimes you have to use a drill, etc., right? So as a manager, one has to understand, hey, what is the best research technique I can use given the problem that I have right now? And then you pay someone to do the marketing research. But because if you just go to a consultant and say, yeah, this is the problem, do whatever you think is right, then, usually they try to sell whatever they do. If they do experiment, they will do an experiment. If they do focus group, they say, focus group is the best. If they do neuroscience, they say, let's do neuroscience. But actually that power shouldn't be in the consulting company, but should be in the manager company. Say, given this problem, I know that here is best to do an experiment. This other problem, here is best to do a focus group. This other problem, neuroscience. So I will contact specific companies to solve these problems, but I don't want to be in the weeds, of the problem or how they do it, but I want to be the decision maker, which is the right tool for the right problem. So that's the first module. And the second module is mostly consumer psychology. And it's basically how to apply psychology into marketing. And I had to design this course from scratch, and that was a great experience. And again, I relied on 2 people I already mentioned. Was one Tom Steinberg and Laline Anik. That both of them are great friends, and Laline and I were also hired together, and we became some sort of brother and sister. And also she was designing her elective. And, we were discussing nights and evenings and days together. What are you going to do? How you're planning to do this? So it was great to go through the process with a person that became big part of my life. And she was going through the same process. So, exchanging ideas, etc. So the first time I created this class and I thought, oh my God, this is going to be a disaster. Maybe not like that. Maybe I thought, I don't know if people will actually think this is interesting. That's my question. And when I had students coming to me at the end of the first time I taught my elective and say, oh my God, Luca, this is so useful. Thank you so much. Or people coming back from their internship and say, oh my God, I used your principle in my internship so much. That filled my heart with joy. And so it was the last iteration of consumer behavior. I taught 2 sections, and still I had a waiting list of 40, 50 people on top of the 2 sections. So I was very happy to see that it's not only something that I love to teach, it's really something that I wake up in the morning and I'm looking forward to teach, but it's also something that the students think, oh, that's cool, that's useful, And so, and because, it's great, as I mentioned before, to coordinate with other faculty like we do in the core, but there's also an aspect of being able to go in class and then do your own thing. And so I always have the special relationship with the students in my consumer behavior class, because it's like sort of experience that we go through together, and I get to know them. And they also at the end create their own project where they use techniques that I taught in class. So they have actually to use in practice to solve a problem in consumer psychology that they think is interesting. And so reading about their work also is very fun, entertaining, and always puts a smile on my face. And I'm so proud of them. So yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Well, Luca, I appreciate your mentioning the project, the experiential aspect of that course, because I think one of the questions we've gotten in the Q&A is about, well, I'm hearing a lot about case studies. What other ways do students learn at Darden? And I think in particular in the second year, we start hearing a lot about experiential learning and this kind of hands-on, maybe project-based coursework that students are doing. I'm also thinking about like Darden Worldwide courses. Did you go on a trip to Italy, I think?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes.
Tell us about that.
So yes. So first of all, yeah, especially in consumer behavior, because it was new, there were not many cases about it. And so again, thanks to the guidance also of the other people in the marketing department and Tom Steinberg, I try to think, okay, what can I do when I don't teach a case? So I create many exercises. And I wrote some of my own cases, right? So right now it's mostly case dependent, but my first iteration, I think, was like 60% cases and 40% exercise. Now, in the core, there are only cases, but in the electives, it's common to have some faculty asking people to read books and comment about that. Not my elective, but others. Or in my case, having exercises, like reading technical notes, like things that, I would have a lecture on that. But instead of having a lecture, I give you the material you can read by yourself. And then when you're in class, we exercise on the material that you read. Because sometimes it's difficult to have a case on everything, right? Sometimes there's not a problem. There's just a theory. And so I let them read the theory and then see how we can apply the theory in practice. So that's another way I used a lot in my elective, like exercises, group projects, individual assignments, so that's a lot of fun. And yes, we do also have Darden Worldwide courses, and I had a blast every time I do that. I did it twice. This is going to be my third year doing that. The first 2 years I went with the dean of Darden, Scott Beersley, and Mark Johnson, and they were awesome, and we had such a good time. And this year I'm going to with Tom Steinberg, so I'm also looking forward to that. But we do a lot of fun stuff. For example, we go in Italy, and we go to see places like businesses in Italy. My classes in Italy is all about export and luxury and the food industry. So, for example, we go to some winery in the Chianti region to see how they produce wine, how they think about selling their wine and export their wine in the US market. We went to see some sort of timeshare that was owned by one of the Darden alumni in Florence. Then we went to see Gucci in Florence, etc., etc. Then 1 year we went to near Bologna, and 1 year we went to see Ferrari. And one of the Darden alumni was the CFO of one of the Ferrari's sponsors. So we had an incredible experience chatting with the chief designer of Ferrari, and then many other times we saw other great companies like Pagani, Ducati, And so it's a lot of fun. You really get to know the students. There is some learning experience, like talking with say the chief designer of Ferrari, or the the owner of a big winery, or the owner of the Marzocco, that was another place where we went, that is a coffee maker business. And so learning about their businesses and why Italy, why there is so much concentration of food industry, luxury business, why in Italy, what is the interesting part about the culture, what works well, what doesn't work well, is very enriching, because of course we want to give students a global perspective. And so, yes, we can teach all we want about global marketing or global business, but going there and see firsthand businesses in person in another country is a great experience. Not only that, drinking a few glasses of wine, if you're into wine, and going and seeing beautiful cars, motorbikes, clothing isn't bad, So there is this also a fun aspect to it that is not the primary aspect, but doesn't hurt to go there, have fun in a very friendly environment. Like the dean, for example, always had a gelato competition where to find what is the best gelato in all the cities we were going through. And, like something like that is adding some fun to the learning experience. And you're basically a group of 30, 35 students plus faculties, 40 people group, and it's a lot of fun, and you get to know each other, and so it's a lot of fun. I really love that.
Well, Luca, I want to transition slightly to talk about one of your recent articles. You helped us out with the military open house that we hosted up in Roslyn, and you were coming off giving a talk at another university about the article that you had published about artificial intelligence and marketing. And there's a couple of Darden Ideas to Action articles in which you talk about this idea of word of machine. And I think we're all used to word of mouth. Word of machine is a little bit different. What is word of machine?
Well, that's an interesting article. Actually, tautological. I wrote it, so I hope I found that interesting. But in any case, but actually that article also won an award as best research in practice by the American Marketing Association. So I was very glad that was recognized by the field as a research that has a big impact. But basically the idea started actually from a student of mine at Darden. He was working he went for an internship at Walmart. And he came back and said, hey, look, it was interesting. I was working on the website, the aspect of Walmart. And basically there, when you go to Walmart and you buy something, usually the algorithm says, oh, if you buy this, I would also recommend these other products, etc. And so it said that for some categories of products, people were following the algorithm. For some other categories of products, people were not following the algorithm's suggestion. And so, but they didn't figure out which and why. And so me and a very good friend and great researcher, Chiara Longoni, worked together on this project where basically we thought about, okay, so when people prefer to follow recommendation by an AI and when people actually prefer recommendation from a human. And then what we hypothesize is that there is a sort of a bias for which we see AI being very good in objective tasks. And so maybe they are very good. We think they are very good in assessing utilitarian items. And we think about humans and very, very good in terms of emotions, senses, and more like hedonic, sensorial products. Now, there is a note here because it's not necessarily true. This is more like a bias in the sense that, yes, machines, AI can be good in assessing objective things, but so humans are many times. It's not that necessarily machines are better in assessing utilitarian characteristic than humans. And now AI is also able to create recipes, like, for example, at McCormick, the spice industry, they use AI to create new spice combinations. AI creates poetry. AI creates painting that are now sold for thousands of dollars. So it's not also true that AI is unable to create something more hedonic or experiential. However, our main idea is that given this bias, people may prefer recommendation from AI when the item is utilitarian, and recommendation from human when the item is or the object is hedonic. Let me give you an example. So the first thing that we did was actually super fun. Two studies that are very fun. The first one was in my hometown in the mountains. So we will actually have the Olympics in, I don't know, Winter Olympics together with Milan in 2026, 28, something like that. And we ran the study when this thing was announced. So I went to a bar and basically I placed like two flyers and then a description over the flyer saying, hey, one day the description was very utilitarian and basically was, hey, with the Olympics coming to town, it's very important to invest right now in real estate because you want to have a place that is very well positioned in terms of future sales possibility, a place that is situated in an optimal area of the town in case you want to see the Olympics, but don't spend too much time in traffic. This description, very objective, etc., etc. And then I was saying, you can pick one of these two flyers, one with a selection of real estate properties made by a human in the real estate agency, and I used the real estate agency that was very popular in my town, or one that was a selection of real estate property made by an algorithm. And so what we noticed is that we asked to pick only one flyer. So to the patrons of the bar. And so we noticed that people were picking, when the description was very utilitarian, so, you want to pick something that is good for your future investment, et cetera, people prefer to pick, on average, people picked more the flyer with the selection made by a selection of properties made by an AI. However, when we say something like, the day after, we'd repeat the same experiment, but the description was slightly different. We said the Olympics are coming to town. You want maybe to think about investment, and you want something to find a place with a great vista, with a place that you can enjoy the energy that the Olympics will create, blah blah blah. So much more sensorial, much more hedonic. And in that case, people pick the flyer with the selection made by the person compared to the selection made by an AI. Now, I know that we are running out of time, but two things that I think are particularly interesting. One is, one could say, but of course, AI cannot taste or see. So clearly, people use human in that case. Well, we also ran experiments where it's not that the AI or human were necessarily tasting or watching, but we're basically saying, you have a lot of reviews, for example, and the AI or a human is creating something out of this review or this information. But it's not that they necessarily have to taste something, And so then we had a study. So basically where we said, we have students coming at school, and we gave chocolate to them, and the chocolate was the same. But to one group of students, we said this chocolate was made by us following the recipe of an AI chocolatier. And to the other group of students, we said this chocolate was made by us following the recipe of a human chocolatier. And then we asked students how much they thought, how much was the taste. So more hedonic characteristic, more sensorial characteristic, and how much they thought the chocolate was healthy. That is more utilitarian, objective characteristic. And again, the chocolate was the same. But when people thought the chocolate was made following the recipe of AI, they thought that the chocolate was less tasty and more healthy. And when they thought they were eating the chocolate made based on a recipe created by a human, they thought that the chocolate was more tastier, but less healthy. So, there are a lot of implication in that, and we had a lot of fun making these experiments.
So, Luca, we've got a few questions here. Do you have time for maybe 2 or 3 questions?
Of course.
All right. One of the questions is really interesting to me. I'm curious to see where you go with it. Marketing. We think of it as like, there's so much information about consumers now. Obviously, all these digital technologies have created so much possibility, I think, from a marketing standpoint. So as you look at marketing today, here, 2022, what's the same as it's always been, and what's maybe a bit different? Is it possible to sort of think through this in a certain way?
Totally. It's a very good question. I think some principles are still working the same. Like, we're still humans. We're still mostly irrational, or at least big part of our decision is irrational. And we're still feeling the impacts of brands. And marketing still face some issues related to chain organization, the structure of their chain and their channels. So there are problems and strategies. Like, the strategy of thinking about marketing is the same. Marketing is all about creating values. And how you create value by basically understanding the consumer very well and trying to understand what the consumer desire, but is not yet able to articulate. And then providing a solution and a service or a product that can fulfill that need, that desire. That stays the same. So many principles, it's not that the digital revolution has changed the way people behave or think. We are still humans, and so some principle of marketing is still there. That being said, of course, on a more tactical level, a lot of things have changed. Meaning, how do you convey advertising, how you obtain data, how you think about issues like privacy, customization. That's revolutionized and completely different from what was 5 years, 10 years, 15 years ago. And so thinking about influencer, TikTok, you name it, those things are very different than 5 years ago and will be very different in 5 years. So that is a very important aspect to think about, and the digitalization of marketing is true. But I want to say this is very true, and it's mostly tactical. But in terms of strategy, I think some principles that were true 5 years ago, 10 years ago are still, not all of them, but many of them are applicable. And we are so, of course, I love the digital space. I work on AI, so, but at the same time, we have to forget that many people, actually the majority, depends from the, of course, from the category of products, but many people go still in the store to buy stuff, right? So it's not that everything is sold digitally and that's it. So we have to consider the digital channels, especially because the new generation are going to be much more digital dependent than the older generations, but some principles are still the same.
All right, a couple of questions here for you as we wrap up. We always like to ask faculty, you have such a great perspective on the student experience, and you teach students, and you obviously love to support them as they go through their learning process here at Darden. What advice would you share with folks about, all right, so you start an MBA program, what does it take to be successful, or what would you encourage a student to do as they start down this path?
Ooh, I would say to be open to learn. That sounds cheesy, but the main idea is that what I see sometimes that students come here and usually are excellent students, and they're usually perceived to be the best in their class. And they come here and they say, shoot, the other 70 students in my class are also the best in the class. And that's sometimes could be very demoralizing. Or thinking, okay, I know how to do finance very well. I will do finance but then I see things like marketing or leadership. I have no idea how to do it. And it feels very uncomfortable. But the main idea is that people take an MBA or an executive MBA, not because they want to learn what they already know, but because they want to learn things that are different. They want to go outside their comfort zone, and they will be surrounded by people that are very smart. That could be in the future their colleagues, their peers, or they can learn from them in class. And so that's a realization that usually happens a little bit later. But the main idea to come to Darden and say, hey, I know that I will struggle in some topics. It's fine. Everyone does it. I know that there are people in my class that are very smart, and maybe I will not be the smarter in the class. That's fine. That's how life is. There is always a person smarter than you. But instead of seeing that a competition, I will see that how can I pick their mind about something, how I can be as good as them in that specific subject, right? Instead of saying, oh, I'm jealous, screw them, I have to be better. It's like, how can I learn from these people? Why they're so good, say, in this topic or in this subject? How can I learn from them? How can I pick their mind about that? So that's the right attitude, I think, to come at Darden.
I love that point. Remembering that you came here to learn in the first place. Oftentimes, I'll run into a student who is taking a class and it's just not clicking, and they're like, "I don't know any of these things that we're learning about." And you always try to remind them, "Well, that's why you're here. That's why you decided to do the program." Last question, Luca. There may be some folks on this call who got interested in some of the things we talked about here today, or just interested in learning more about marketing. Do you have any books that you'd recommend? We always ask for maybe 3 books as a next step, or just something that you would recommend somebody pick up to learn a bit more?
That's an interesting question. I would say, well, depends. We talk about so many things that it's difficult to give book recommendation, but I would say some classics. Like there is a book written by Robert Cialdini about the power of persuasion, and that's a classic. It's basically, he became even a salesman to learn the principles of what salesmen do or saleswomen do, and then to try to understand from a psychology point of view what are the principles of that. So every book by Cialdini on persuasion it's amazing to start this idea of psychology and marketing, and that's for sure a basic book, but really fun book. And then there are other books that could also be interesting, like Think Fast, Think Slow by Kahneman. That's also a very interesting book. Or many books by Dan Ariely. They're also very interesting, especially the one that talk about our more irrational side. So these are, authors that summarize a lot of principle by other authors, and they're pretty interesting to read.
Well, Luca, I want to thank you for your time. I will say that Daniel Kahneman book, Thinking Fast and Slow, is it's a pretty common recommendation here on Office Hours. It's one that clearly I think a lot of the faculty have read and paid attention to, and it would certainly encourage our prospective students to check it out too. It's a fantastic book.
It's because especially if you come from an accounting, I don't want to give a prescription, but sometimes when I'm from a very numerical side, sometimes it's difficult to see, hey, people can be very rational in their decisions. So it's a book that say, hey, we need automatic thinking to survive, and otherwise we think forever about any decision in our lives. So it's a great book.
Well, Luca, thank you for being here and for sharing your time and your experience. I know you have so many things going on, and this is hosting office hours, being able to share these conversations with our prospective students to give them an opportunity to hear the passion of the faculty for what they teach, what they research, and just to give them a sense of the people they might be able to connect with in a classroom here at Darden is tremendous. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Brett. Thank you for doing this. We're really grateful that you're doing this. Thank you for having me. And if anyone has any question, they can reach out to me. My email is very easy. It's Luca, my name, Luca, @virginia.edu. So if you have any questions, I'm here. But Brett, thank you again for having this.
And that was a recording of our office hours conversation with Professor Luca Cian, member of the marketing faculty here at the Darden School of Business. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at Darden, that's DARDEN, @virginia.edu. Until next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.